Arsenal against Chelsea, Sunday afternoon live with us. We'll be bringing you updates throughout the afternoon with Game Day Live. Mood music changes on Arsenal every single week, Scott, doesn't it? 1 minute they're brilliant, next minute they're not. They did a brilliant job of beating Tottenham at Tottenham 4-1, but everybody beats Tottenham at Tottenham. So what did you learn from that particular game that gives you confidence that Arsenal could go on and win the league?
That they have the mentality. I think that's the biggest issue from here on in now. We know they've got strength in depth. We know they've got quality players. We know that technically they're as good as anyone in the Premier League. They have the best squad in the Premier League. Now, what goes on between the ears? And for me, the way they bounced back after that United game where they beat Leeds convincingly at Ellen Road, and then coming back after that. Look, okay, it's a poor Spurs side, but I was listening to you as I was taking the dogs for a walk, and you were saying this is one of the best atmospheres you've ever been involved in. It was incredible. So to deal with that, to go into the Lions' Den, to dominate the game in the way that they did, and let's face it, the stats will show that they absolutely did dominate it. The eye test will also tell you as well. From a mentality point of view, they are worthy champions. The problem is, so are Manchester City.
Yeah, and Manchester City have got the form over the last part of the season. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it's a different Manchester City this year. They've got loads of changes to personnel. But even last year, when they'd had the rebuild, they went unbeaten in the last 10 games of the league season. It's just the way that he preps the side at the beginning of the campaign to get them to hit peak form towards the end of each season. So there will be a threat. The good news for Arsenal is if you look at their running, there's not much there to trouble them apart from the game against Chelsea that we're going to on Sunday and the match with Manchester City. So 3 points here is essential, right?
Yeah, and I think they'll get it. I know you've been talking to Alan Brazil and Ray Parlour about the fact that Chelsea haven't beaten Arsenal anywhere in any competition for 4 years. Arsenal's record in London derbies is sensational. I think they've lost one of the last 26. At home, they're pretty much imperious. And I can just see a scenario, maybe it's a lazy narrative because they've just had Fofana sent off, their 8th red card of the season, where Chelsea do something stupid in this game on Sunday. Their emotions get the better of them and Arsenal go on and win it. And yeah, I think it will be another step closer to the title.
Is that a bit of wishful thinking as well? Because Chelsea are big rivals with Manchester United for a top 5 place?
Well, it's a massive weekend for United. We'll come on to Crystal Palace. I think United will beat Palace. And what I saw last night, I don't think Chelsea beat Arsenal. So therefore, this could be a pivotal weekend, not just in terms of the title, but the race for a Champions League place as well.
It will be unlikely for Chelsea to do something silly again. They haven't got the form for getting players sent off on a regular basis, Scott, or giving away stupid goals when they've got in front. How did Chelsea negotiate a trip to the Emirates? Because Crook's right, their record against Mikel Arteta's team, absolutely abysmal. And Arsenal have lost just 3 of their 43 matches this season.
Yeah, I can see tactics being quite similar to how Liam deployed it in the second leg of the Carabao Cup final just a few weeks ago, just trying to make it very, very difficult to beat. Like I was at the home game and Moises Caicedo got sent off. And yet that was a brilliant performance. It really was with 10 men.
We were buzzing after that, Scott, weren't we?
Yeah, that was after the Barcelona win as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So new manager, but same problem of losing points and winning positions, same problem of discipline, same problem being at home. Obviously, this one's not at home, of just not seeing out wins. Yeah, I think maybe, again, 6-8 weeks ago, then Chelsea would have a chance of getting a point here. But I think not only are Arsenal buoyed by what they did against Spurs, but Chelsea looked vulnerable. And I was at Stamford Bridge at the Burnley game, and it was just a really poor performance all round. So, unfortunately, I can't see Chelsea getting anything out of this game.
Really poor performance because they looked like they believed that they were going to beat Burnley no matter what. Yeah. That was the impression that I got from watching that game back on Saturday night. And I think there is a difference between Chelsea that play Wolves, Chelsea that play Leeds, Chelsea that play Burnley, and Chelsea that play Liverpool, Barcelona, and Arsenal. Actually, if you look at the record under Liam Rosenior, they've only lost to Arsenal. They haven't lost to anybody else since he's taken charge, and they do pick up some sizable wins, sometimes against some of the best teams in the league. So they do seem to raise their game for those big matches, and they're going to need to, because their next few weeks is absolutely horrendous. They have got the worst running out of everybody. And actually, the Opta supercomputer predicts they'll finish in 6th position this year, which, bearing in mind, they've just lost the GDP of a small European nation, means that they'll finish outside the Champions League places, which would be hell for them.
Yeah, I think it will, and it'll go back to, was it the right decision to part company with Enzo Maresca? Is there a flaw in the recruitment model? So I think this is a big few weeks for Chelsea, particularly having lost that League Cup semi-final. Obviously still in the FA Cup, but they've got a tricky tie there as well, away from home against a Wrexham side who are banging form in the Championship.
Scott, your mate Victor Gyökeres banged in a couple of goals last week against Tottenham Hotspur. How will he do against Chelsea? And who should be the supply line, Eze or Odegaard?
So anybody who's Portuguese or comes from Portugal is now my mate. Is that what we're saying? Yeah.
Pretty much, mate. To be honest with you.
Fair enough. I mean, it was a great performance, wasn't it? And you might turn around and he might look back at it in terms of, I mean, it's taken its time in terms of a really good all-round performance, not just scoring goals. But what a game to do it in, just like Eze as well. And he's done it in both of them. Look, if I had everyone fit, I'd have Havertz up front and I'd have Odegaard playing. Eze I thought was superb and really good. And well, both of those players were, a lot of the Arsenal players were. But in terms of doing it on a consistent basis, for me, I'd go with Odegaard over Eze. I love Eze as a player. I loved him at QPR. I've always, been sort of backing him and saying he's a quality player and he should be playing for England, certainly in the squad. But he's a player of moments, whereas Martin Odegaard, not only with the ball does he help control the game, but he's much more tactically aware how to press as well. So in terms of that, I'd go with Odegaard. And look, Kai Havertz is injured and you've got to play Gyökeres. He can't do any more than what he's done. Just let him go now and see what happens.
The other thing about Eze is that he often shines in those games where he's given room to play, and Tottenham certainly gave him room to play last week, which was a massive issue for them. As for Chelsea, back-to-back draws against promoted sides. You mentioned there actually whether or not the question will be asked at the end of the season if Chelsea don't make Champions League. Was it the right decision to part with Enzo Maresca? Has Liam Rosenior's reputation been damaged by those two draws? Or do you actually think, hold on a second, the guy's only lost 2 games and they were both to Arsenal. Maybe we should cut him a little bit of slack.
Yeah, I think it's more of a flaw of the recruitment. They're making basic errors, silly red cards in Fofana's case that you expect from a club and a squad that are devoid of any leaders. And it's something that you guys have spoken about regularly, that naivety, which I think ultimately is going to prove their undoing. But they've got a rookie manager as well in terms of the Premier League. So not only the players learning on the job, so is Liam Rosenior. And this is not a Keith Andrews Brentford situation. At Brentford, you've got a forgiving fan base. You can afford to make the occasional mistake. At Chelsea, everything Liam Rosenior does is going to be analysed to the 10th degree.
Okay, let's ask the question about the recruitment, because I was with Simon Jordan this week and we had a little chat off air and he was saying, what Chelsea are doing long term is going to be fine. And I said, the problem is they're not going to win the league the way they are. They're never going to win the league, right? Because they've got no senior players. The difference between what's happened at Brighton, where they've sort of copied the whole model, they've almost sort of looked at Brighton, copy and pasted, but left out the bit where they bring senior pros alongside them. Where's the Milner, Welbeck and Lallana figure, the Lewis Dunk figure that
Pascal
helps
Gross.
them along? Pascal Gross, yeah. So where's that? And Simon said, well, who would you sign then? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know who you would sign off the top of my head, but you need to have senior players. And he said, you can't just say that. You have to have examples. Now, actually, thinking about it sort of since then, there is a bit of a dearth in the Premier League of players between the ages of 25 and 30 who you would go and pinch right now and put in the Chelsea team. So is there a lack of players, which is the reason behind Chelsea not having the senior pros, or is it still a failure of the recruitment that they haven't got those characters?
Well, I wish you'd have told me we were going to mention that, because I would have come up with a few names, I'm sure. But no, I mean, the bottom line is you can see for the last 3 or 4 years, since after the first window or first 2 windows, they've gone purely youth. And that's it. There's enough data and analysis, and we don't have the data in front of us that they will have to say that this guy is still doing.
Would you have gone down the route of signing someone like Christian Norgard, for example, who went from Brentford to Arsenal, or someone at I don't know, another successful club in the Premier League, someone like maybe at Crystal Palace, who did well last year, who could be parachuted into that back line. And Mark Gay might have been a good
Well,
option.
I was going to say they should have certainly been part of that conversation, and they never were. And actually, they were at pains to distance themselves from that conversation.
So midfield was never the problem. That's not the problem for Chelsea. And I said in last summer, if you remember, goalkeeper, centre half, centre forward. Now, I understand the Liam Delap £30 million is a bit of a no-brainer, but he's still very unproven, and we're seeing that. I'd still take Nicholas Jackson, for all his faults, over Liam Delap, and that tells us really where we are. These are the key positions. These are the key positions of a football team, apart from left back, of course. The goalkeeper, the spine of the team, the centre half, and the centre forward. And unfortunately, as well as Joao Pedro's done, and he has done, if you've got a top-class striker and you've got a defender, Mike Maignan, for example, what happened there with that deal where they actually made the offer and then they kind of backtracked and said, no, we're not going to go and we don't need him anymore. So I just feel in terms of just around the training pitch, around the training ground, that's again where those standards are set from the senior pros. And it's not just me, you know, I've spoken to John Terry about it. He came on a golf day and he was said exactly the same thing. So give me a little bit of time, give me a little bit of data and that and analysis, and I'll be able to come out with some names.
Okay, John Terry also a little bit upset, I think, that he wasn't in the conversation when Chelsea needed an interim manager for a couple of games, and he's been working with the under-21s at the club, and everybody from that group moved up and worked with the first team, and he didn't, and he was a little bit upset.
That is a
about
bit of a snub.